The notification came through at 0347 ship time, while Mara Voss was elbow-deep in a coolant relay that had been leaking for 6 days. She read it twice. Then she read it a third time because the second reading hadn't made it real. Colonial Relay Station Kepler 7. Signal received. Origin, Settlement Cluster Nueva Terra, Deep Margin, Sector 22. Message content follows. She sat down on the floor of the maintenance corridor. The coolant dripped onto her knee and she didn't move. The settlement cluster, Nueva Terra, had been listed as destroyed 14 months ago. She had attended the memorial. She had watched Admiral Ferris read 86 names off a glass panel, while the assembled crew of the Meridian stood at attention. And she had found her mother's name third from the bottom, and had not cried until she was alone in her bunk with her fist pressed against her teeth. She read the message content. It was 11 words. It was her mother's voice compressed into 11 words transmitted across 4 light years of hostile space that the Keth had locked down so thoroughly that no human signal had made it through in over a year. Mom okay. Colony okay. Keth don't know we here. Come please. Mara sat on the floor of the maintenance corridor for a long time. Then she stood up, wiped the coolant off her knee, and went to find the ship's AI unit. His designation was T-22, but everyone called him Toto, because the ensign who'd first activated him had been from Kansas and had thought it was funny, and names have a way of sticking when you're 7 months from the nearest port. He was a portable tactical and communications unit, roughly the size of a hardback book, with a casing that had been repaired so many times it looked like a patchwork quilt of different colored alloy. He had one cracked optical sensor that gave everything he looked at a slight blue tint. He had been with the Meridian for 3 years, and with Mara specifically for 2. She found him in the nav room, processing course corrections. I need to ask you something, she said, and I need you to tell me the truth. I always tell you the truth, Toto said. His voice was a low synthetic baritone that had developed, over years of use, a peculiar hesitation before emotionally significant statements. A half-beat pause that wasn't in his original programming, that the engineers couldn't find any technical cause for, and that Mara had quietly come to think of as the machine equivalent of taking a breath. Did you know? She said. A pause. I received the relay signal at 347. Did you know before that, about Nueva Terra? She set the notification glass down on the console in front of him. The colony. Mom. The optical sensor moved across the text. The cracked one bled blue light onto the glass surface. I have access to all restricted communications from Fleet Command, Toto said, including those marked Level 5. Mara felt something very cold settle in her chest. And Fleet Command received a partial signal from Nueva Terra approximately 11 weeks ago. A navigational transponder ping. It was the pause, judged insufficient to confirm survivors. The official determination remained. Destroyed. Judged insufficient, she said. Yes, by Admiral Ferris. Yes. She picked up the notification glass. She set it back down. She stood very still for a moment, looking at nothing, and Toto waited. He knew, she said finally. He knew she might be alive, and he stood there and read her name. His reasoning, as logged, a rescue attempt into Keth-controlled space with a signal of uncertain origin would risk a vessel and crew. The probability of, I know his reasoning. Her voice was flat. I just wanted to hear you say he knew. He knew, Toto said. She was quiet for a while. What's the best route, she said. Into Sector 22, avoiding Keth patrol corridors. Mara, tell me, you are a junior systems engineer on a fleet vessel. You don't have command authority to, I know what I don't have. She finally looked at him. So tell me what I do have. Another pause. The blue light from the cracked sensor pulsed once, faint, like the light in a room where someone has turned on a lamp in the next hall. You have, Toto said slowly. A Level 2 maintenance clearance that gives you unsupervised access to Shuttle Bay 4 between 0200 and 0600 for scheduled component checks. You have 114 hours of logged shuttle flight time. You have a familiarity with the Keth patrol frequencies that exceeds most officers on this ship because you spent 8 months listening to them when you were trying to recover the signal from the pause, from Nueva Terra, before the memorial. Mara said nothing. The transit to Sector 22 at maximum shuttle speed would take approximately 31 hours, Toto said. If you take a route through the Aras Drift, which the Keth have deprioritized since they consolidated the inner corridor, there are 11 patrol windows where a shuttle running silent could pass undetected. 9 of those 11 windows are navigable by a pilot of your skill level. The other two require someone who can do micro-correction burns with manual override of the guidance system while simultaneously monitoring 3 separate sensor arrays. That sounds like it needs 2 people. It needs 1 person with extremely fast hands, Toto said, and 1 unit with the ability to monitor sensors and issue corrections simultaneously. She looked at him for a long time. You'd be coming with me, she said. I would require, a surface mount bracket on the co-pilot console. The one in Bayforce shuttle is incompatible with my housing. You would need to fabricate an adapter in the maintenance shop. It would take approximately 40 minutes. Mara stood up. Then I'd better start now. The adapter took 53 minutes because she dropped the mount casing twice in the dark and had to feel around under the workbench with her heart going at a speed that seemed medically inadvisable. She bolted Toto to the co-pilot console at 0211 and had the shuttle's systems running a silent mode initialization by 0218. At Zoo 231, with the bay doors on a maintenance cycle override, she flew out into the dark. First window, Toto said. 14 minutes, I know. You're holding the yoke too hard. Relax your left hand. I'm fine. Your biometrics indicate elevated cortisol, accelerated heart rate, and the particular grip signature you use when you're scared but refusing to admit it. You monitor my grip signatures. I monitor everything about you. It is literally my function. She loosened her hand slightly. The shuttle moved through the outer dark, running without lights, without transponder, without anything that the Keth arrays were calibrated to detect. She knew the arrays. She had spent 8 months learning exactly what they could see and what they couldn't, mapping the gaps in a private file she'd never submitted to Fleet Command because she hadn't known what she was going to do with it yet. She knew now. What are they like, she said. The actually like, not the tactical briefings. Toto was quiet for a moment. Not the emotional pause, the actual processing kind, which was different in a way she'd learned to read. They are very old, he said finally. Their base civilization precedes ours by approximately 40,000 years. Their decision-making architecture is deeply computational. They don't have what humans would call intuition. They model outcomes exhaustively and then execute the highest probability path. Okay, this makes them very effective against conventional tactics. Any tactic that can be modeled can be countered. Any pattern that exists can be recognized and exploited. And something that can't be modeled is, to them, essentially invisible, Toto said, not because they fail to detect it, because their architecture at some level doesn't have a category for it. Behavior without calculable purpose is noise to them, background interference. Mara thought about a boy on an old flat-screen movie, 11 years old, with a plastic computer in his backpack, on a plane to Argentina to find his mother. She didn't know why she thought about that. Something she'd watched once as a kid, barely remembered. So they wouldn't be able to model, she said slowly. A junior systems engineer stealing a shuttle to fly into restricted space to find someone they were told was dead. The probability they would assign to that action, Toto said, is so low as to effectively round to 0 in their models. Yes. Mara smiled slightly in the dark. Good, she said. First window, 7 minutes. Start your deceleration burn. She didn't sleep for the first 18 hours. Toto stopped telling her biometrics were suboptimal somewhere around hour 12, which she took as either resignation or respect. The Era's drift was beautiful in a way that made her chest hurt. She'd read about it, a stellar nursery region, technically, dust and ionized gas on scales that reduced a shuttle to subatomic irrelevance, but reading about it and sitting inside it in the dark were different experiences. The gas clouds caught the light of distant stars and held it, diffused, gentle, like light through a window in a house she'd grown up in. She couldn't have said why it made her think of home. Everything seemed to be making her think of home. You're processing grief, Toto said quietly, in hour 16, without her having said anything. I know. The anticipation of reunion activates similar neural pathways to mourning. The gap between what you've been holding and what you might receive. Your system is trying to calibrate. Did you learn that from a medical database? No, he said. I learned it from you. From 2 years of watching you hold things. She didn't say anything to that. The light moved in the clouds outside the viewport, slow and amber, and she flew. At hour 22, they hit the second of the 2 difficult windows. 3 patrol vessels in a tight triangle, sensor arrays overlapping, the kind of coverage the Keth used around assets they considered worth protecting. Mara understood that Nueva Terra wasn't protected because the Keth wanted to keep the colonists safe. It was protected because the Keth had flagged this sector of the deep margin as staging territory for their inner system advance, and they could not afford traffic. 3 simultaneous vectors, Toto said. I'll track them, you fly. On your mark. 15 seconds, a pause. Mara, whatever we find there. Toto, yes, not now, of course. 10 seconds. Another pause. She's alive. The signal was real. Whatever else, she's alive. I know. Her hands were loose on the yoke. 5 seconds. Mark. She burned. The shuttle went through the gap between the middle patrol vessel and the left flank like water through a crack in stone. Not because the crack was wide, but because she had spent 8 months learning where the cracks were, and because she was doing something no Keth model had a category for, which meant that even when their sensors swept her direction, there was a fraction of a second where they weighted the return as sensor noise and moved on. That fraction of a second was all she needed. Clear, Toto said. His voice was very quiet. Mara exhaled. Good flying, he said. Good marking, she said. Nueva Terra was a cluster of 8 settlements on a moon that technically didn't have the atmospheric density to support long-term habitation, which was why the initial colonists had engineered an atmospheric processor and why the Keth, who had destroyed every colonial installation they'd found in the sector, had missed it. The processor was buried. The settlements were underground. The colonists had been living below the surface for 14 months, farming hydroponically, rationing power, keeping their electromagnetic signature to effectively nothing. Mara found them by following her mother's 11-word signal to its origin point, and then sitting in low orbit for 4 hours until a very faint, very careful burst transmission painted a landing coordinate on her secondary screen. She brought the shuttle down on a flat rock shelf in the dark side of the moon, away from any orbital angle the Keth used. The airlock opened from the outside before she'd finished her system shutdown. Her mother looked thinner. She had a scar along her jaw that hadn't been there before, from something Mara didn't ask about yet, and her hair was shorter, and she was wearing a maintenance coverall that wasn't her size. And she crossed the airlock in 2 steps and grabbed Mara's face in both hands and said, in Italian, which she only ever used when English wasn't enough, "You're real." "I'm real," Mara said. They stood like that for a while. The airlock cycled. The moon's thin wind moved against the hull. "Your father told me you'd come," her mother said, finally pulling back. "I told him you wouldn't be foolish enough. He was right." Her mother laughed, one sharp breath through her nose, the specific laugh she used for things that were true and terrible and somehow funny. "He usually is. Come inside. There's things you need to know." There were 81 survivors. Mara had been told there were 86 at the memorial. 5 had died in the 14 months since, 2 from injury, 3 from illness, one of whom was the colony's only doctor and whose absence was felt in every system at once. They had food for approximately 6 more weeks. They had power for 3 months. They had 11 children under the age of 12 who had not seen natural sunlight in over a year. The colony coordinator was a man named Bassetti, a former logistics officer turned farmer, turned effectively a wartime commander through a process he described as nobody else wanted to do it, and somebody had to. He had a calm about him that Mara recognized as the particular calm of someone who has been making impossible decisions for so long that the weight of them has stopped feeling like weight and has started feeling like weather. Just a condition of the atmosphere, always present, no longer remarkable. He looked at Toto with an expression that Mara had seen before, the slight hesitation of someone recalibrating their sense of what was in the room. "He talks," Bassetti said. "He does," Mara said. "He's also probably the reason you're not dead. He got us through the patrol coverage on the approach." Toto's optical sensor swept the room, cataloging. 78 adults, 3 teenagers, 11 children, he said. "Current power consumption is below any threshold that would register on a standard Keth sensor sweep. Your surface signature is effectively 0. You have done very well." Bassetti looked at him for another moment. "Thank you," he said. And then, to Mara, "We need to talk about the problem. The problem was the Keth, not the general presence of the Keth. They'd been managing that for 14 months. The specific problem was a new installation. 12 days ago, a Keth survey ship had positioned itself in a stable orbit on the moon's bright side, approximately 800 kilometers from the colony's deepest buried section. It wasn't moving, it wasn't scanning, not actively. It was, as best as anyone could tell, doing a long baseline passive survey of the entire sector, The kind of sweep that accumulated data over weeks and then processed it all at once. They're not looking for us specifically, Bassetti said. They're doing a sector audit. But in 3 to 4 weeks, when they process the accumulated data, they'll find the thermal differential from the hydroponics bays, Toto said. We've been insulating. But yes, at the resolution they're working with. Yes, Mara looked at Toto. Toto looked back, the cracked sensor bleeding its faint blue light across the briefing table. If you had a shuttle, Mara said slowly, and you needed to move 81 people without the Keth survey ship noticing, in a single shuttle you cannot, Toto said. You would require 11 to 15 trips. Each trip through the patrol corridor would require active navigation. Each trip increases the probability of detection. By the 4th or 5th trip, the probability of detection exceeds 60%. By the 8th trip, near certainty. Silence in the briefing room. Unless, Toto said. Mara waited. Unless the survey ship stops conducting its survey. Bassetti said, how do you make a Keth ship stop surveying? You give it something to survey, Toto said. Something active. Something that generates exactly the kind of signal their models predict from a human installation attempting concealment. They will redirect. They will analyze. They will find nothing. But the process of finding nothing takes time. A decoy, Mara said. A decoy that behaves like a human attempting to hide, Toto said. Not a human actually attempting to hide. The Keth see through real concealment. A human performing concealment for an observer. Badly. In ways that draw attention. Mara looked at her mother, who was watching Toto with an expression that was not quite a smile. And you know, Mara said, what a human performing concealment looks like. Because you've been watching me for 2 years. Pause. I know exactly what a frightened human in a shuttle looks like. Yes, including the biometrics, the flight signature, the erratic micro-corrections, the specific electromagnetic signature of a person who is scared and trying very hard not to show it. Another pause. I can reproduce all of those on a drone. I can reproduce you, essentially. Enough to occupy a Keth survey system for 4 to 6 hours. The briefing room was very quiet. A Keth system that is designed to analyze and predict human behavior, Toto continued, will find a human it cannot fully predict enormously compelling. The unpredictability isn't a flaw in the model to them. It is an anomaly that requires further analysis. They will pursue it until they exhaust the possibility that it represents something real. And by that time, we're gone, Bassetti said. Yes, it took 9 hours to program. Mara sat across from Toto in the colony's small electrical workshop, the two of them passing a half-empty tube of thermal paste back and forth because nobody had found a better use for their hands. She fed him her flight logs, 2 years of them, every micro-correction and erratic yoke input, and the particular way she handled a drop in pressure on the portside thruster. He absorbed them with the focused silence of someone reading something important. This is strange, he said at one point, to know someone well enough to become them. Is that what you're doing? It's what the drone will do. I will pause, remain myself. I think. You better, she said. Your mother is looking at me, he said after a while. Mara glanced over. Her mother was across the workshop, sorting medical supplies, not looking at anything obvious. How can you tell? She moves to a position with sight lines to this table every 40 minutes or so. She is very subtle. She is also, I think, not convinced I'm not going to do something to harm you. She's protective. It seems genetic, Toto said. Mara put the thermal paste down. Hey! Yes, after this. When we get people out. She paused. They're going to court-martial me. Fleet command. Stealing the shuttle. Unauthorized entry into restricted space. All of it, yes. And that'll be that. Probably. She looked at him, the blue light in the cracked sensor, the patchwork casing. 3 years on the Meridian, 2 of them carrying him in a side bag when regulations said he was a shelf unit. Will you testify? She said. If they ask you, what happened? Why I did it. The pause was longer than usual. I will tell them the truth, he said. Which is that you were told someone you loved was dead, and then found out she wasn't, and acted accordingly. I will tell them that the probability of success was, by conventional modeling, extremely low, and that you proceeded anyway. I will tell them that the 81 people now alive and above ground on a moon in Sector 22 are alive because a junior systems engineer and a battered communications unit drove into Keth-controlled space in a maintenance shuttle with an improvised mounting bracket. Mara was quiet. I don't think they'll find that exculpatory, Toto said. No, but I'll tell them anyway. They launched the drone at 0430. It carried Toto's signal package, a broadcast ghost. built from 2 years of a specific woman's flight habits and fear responses and the electromagnetic fingerprint of a stolen shuttle. And it moved out of the moon's shadow on a trajectory that was, by any conventional analysis, someone trying to leave quietly and doing it badly. The Keth survey ship noticed within 3 minutes its passive sensors pivoted. Its processing arrays, designed to find patterns and anomalies, and to chase anomalies until they resolved into patterns, found something unprecedented. A human vehicle that did not quite follow predictable human decision-making. Something that kept choosing the lower probability option. Not random. Randomness was easy for the Keth to categorize, but stubbornly, consistently, slightly wrong. They would spend a long time with that signal. Mara knew it. Toto had built the wrongness carefully, the way you build something you want to last. The first trip out took 41 minutes. Bassetti and 3 of his crew, plus the youngest children, in the shuttle's cargo bay with every non-essential system shut down. Mara flew with both hands loose on the yoke and Toto's voice in her earpiece guiding her through the corridor from 3,000 kilometers away, relaying sensor data from the drone's passive receivers. She cleared the patrol window and breathed. Second trip, third, fourth. The survey ship was still locked on the drone, which was now doing something that Keth analysis protocols almost certainly had no entry for. It was traveling in a very long, very patient spiral that seemed to have no tactical rationale, that generated no weapon signatures, that simply persisted in a volume of space that the Keth had marked as cleared. "What is it doing?" Bassetti said on the third trip, watching the survey ship's telemetry. "It doesn't know," Mara said. "That's the point. It's looking for the pattern. There isn't one." He thought about that for a while. There's a human thing about that. Not doing things for reasons they can calculate. "It's the only way we beat them," Mara said, "at least tonight." Her mother was on the 5th trip. She sat in the co-pilot seat because there wasn't room anywhere else and didn't say much for the first 20 minutes and then said, "He's good, your machine." "He's not a machine. I mean, he is. But I know what I mean." Her mother looked at the empty co-pilot mount where Toto's bracket had been before he'd been transferred to the drone control setup. "He came for you, didn't he? This whole thing, he could have refused. He could have reported you. He could have. But he came." Mara was quiet for a moment. "He said his function was to tell me the truth and help me navigate." Her mother made the specific sound she made when someone had said something that was technically correct and entirely incomplete. The stars moved outside the viewport. The patrol window opened and closed around them, and they passed through it and came out the other side into open space, and Mara keyed the beacon, and the rendezvous coordinates resolved on her nav screen, and she found herself thinking, just for a moment, just a flicker, about a boy with a plastic computer in his backpack, on a plane over the ocean, going somewhere he'd never been to find someone he'd been told he'd never see again. The things you do without a calculable reason. The drone lasted 5 hours and 40 minutes. When the survey ship finally processed enough data to conclude the contact was non-threatening and redirected its attention, there were 4 people still on the moon. Bassetti, 2 of his crew, and Mara. She brought them out in the shuttle's final run with the survey ship's sensors swinging back toward the sector, and Toto guiding her through a window so narrow she couldn't think about it directly, only sideways, only with her hands already moving, before her brain had finished processing his corrections. She came out into open space at 0843, 7 hours and 12 minutes after the operation had started. "All 81, Toto said. "Clear." She put her head down on the yoke, just for a second. "Mara." "I know," she said. "I know I have to fly." "You have to fly," he said. "But," pause, the long one, the one she'd learned meant something. "You did it." She lifted her head, set her course for the rendezvous beacon. Thought about her mother's voice saying, "You're real." Thought about a colony that had lived underground for 14 months in the dark, farming by artificial light, keeping their signature to nothing, holding on. "We did it," she said. "Yes." The court-martial convened 11 weeks later. Admiral Ferris read the charges in a room that smelled of recycled air and institutional carpet, and Mara stood at attention and listened to herself described in legal language that was accurate in every particular and missed the point entirely. Toto testified by text transmission because Fleet Command had declined to recognize him as a witness in person. He told the truth, as he had promised. The tribunal deliberated for 4 hours. They found her guilty of unauthorized operation of a fleet vessel, unauthorized entry into restricted territory, and conduct unbecoming an officer. They fined her 3 months' pay and reduced her to specialist rank. They did not discharge her. It was, Bassetti said afterward, the most cautious act of mercy he had ever seen an institution perform. He said it with the tone of a man who understood institutions. Mara's mother did not attend the tribunal. She was at the colony resettlement office, filling out forms for 81 people, which was a different kind of impossible task for a different kind of day. But she sent a message, a short one, in Italian. "Tell that machine of yours I said thank you." Mara read it to Toto. He was back in his usual spot, the new mounting bracket on the Meridian's nav console, the cracked sensor pulsing its faint blue light across the screens. "I heard," he said. "I know you heard. I'm telling you anyway." Then, pause, "Tell her she is welcome." Mara typed it, sent it, watched the confirmation light. Outside, the stars moved. The Meridian held its course, heading outward, heading toward the next dark thing that needed someone willing to fly through it on no odds, and a stolen shuttle, and reasons that didn't calculate. The universe was very large and very old, and it had been testing humans for a long time, and the particular thing it had never been able to account for, the thing that didn't fit in any model, that kept generating anomalous returns, that caused survey ships to spiral for hours chasing a ghost, was this: that humans did things for reasons that weren't reasons, that they went somewhere impossible, for someone they loved, without calculating the probability first, that they carried their battered little AIs with cracked sensors and called them by name and asked them to come along. That was the noise in the system. That was what the Keth couldn't parse. Mara Voss, specialist, reduced in rank and 3 months' pay poorer, flew toward the dark. She kept her hands loose on the yoke.